Welcome to the Political Vigilante. I'm not editing any of that. My name is Graham Elwood. It's always fun watching the corporate media and their any attempt to go after socialism. So here's a headline in usatoday.com. CNN thinks that socialism is cool. My grandparents from the USSR would disagree. In the title, they're connecting Soviet-era communism with socialism. See how they do that? That's been a long-standing tactic. Socialism, equality, sharing the wealth, they then equate that with the totalitarian Stalin-era Brezhnev Cold War. It's more actually justification for the Russian Cold War, right? Oh, Putin, he's so awful. There's a new thing on Netflix, a new documentary about how evil Putin is. Again, I don't think Putin's a good dude, but we need him to be a bad guy to justify the war machine to start, our nukes are collecting dust and they're out of date. We need new nukes, right? That's been started to be talked about. So I just want to read you some of this, how the corporate machine is on this ad. There's an ad for a grocery store. There's an ad for Amazon. There's all kinds of business. There's an ad for airline companies. So this is, let me read you some of this. It is frustrating to me that many Americans are ignorant of the crimes of socialist and communist movements. Well, I'm guessing no mention in this article about how the socialism of the labor movement of the 30s really helped workers in America. It was unions fueled by a lot of socialists got us the 40-hour work week, got us the weekend, got us the 8-hour day, got us maternity leave, got us sick days, got us overtime, lunch breaks, all those things. I don't think this is going to be mentioned in this article. My grandmother grew up in the Ukraine, which was then part of the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Russia, USSR, still in place. See how they're doing that? They're making that connection. It's in the title. And now we're going to hear some horror stories of the awful Soviet Union, which is not the socialism we're talking about. Free college tuition and free healthcare is not the Soviet Union. After waking each morning, she checked to see if any of her family members died during the night. Many of her compatriots were already dead because Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader, implemented a mass starvation program. Again, that's not socialism. That's a totalitarian dictator that killed so many people. Right? That killed so many people. It's like saying, I don't even know what the comparison is. It's so insane. It doesn't make any sense. It's like they killed people in libraries, so we shouldn't have public libraries anymore. It's a false connection. The goal of the policy was to starve Ukrainians into submission. That's not socialism, not socialism. Every paragraph here is not talking about socialism. It's talking about an evil dictator. My grandmother only escaped torture when she, along with the Russian man who would become my grandfather, were kidnapped by the Nazis and taken to Germany as slave labor. Thus, they stopped living in the Soviet socialist dream and began experiencing the National Socialist dream instead. See, the Nazis called themselves the National Socialists. They didn't have socialism in Nazi Germany. It was an evil, brutal, horrifying, genocidal, totalitarian regime with an insane demagogue leading it. Again, has nothing to do with you having universal basic income. I was reminded of this all last month when CNN celebrated Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday with a tweet that claimed the civil rights hero was a socialist before it was cool. There are two substantial problems with this. Your bullshit article, is that one of them? First, the most trusted name in news is historically dubious ground. Dr. King was a brilliant theologian, but not an expert in political economy. Man, oh God, now Dr. King didn't understand I think he had a pretty good grasp of the evils of capitalism and how poor people were being completely subjugated and exploited in the richest country in the history of the world. I think Dr. King was very, very in tune, had his fingers on the pulse more so than your bullshit Bernie Sanders is like Joseph Stalin analogy that you're subtly making. These repulsive sentiments are surprisingly common. Instead, they are still fashionable for intellectuals, particularly those in cozy confines of academia who never had to suffer under it. Again, not socialism. I can't even just keep reading this bullshit. Alex Bresnor is a PhD microbiologist and senior fellow at biomedical science at the American Council on Science. So then what the fuck do you know about economy either? How you're saying, so you're saying Dr. King is a theologian and he doesn't understand economics. He's not an economist. Who the fuck are you? You think being a microbiologist means you understand the economy? You talk about liberals living in cushioned things? Where are you? You have a cushioned PhD. It has nothing to do with... that's communism. That's... Just like America is not like a representative democracy. It's not regulated capitalism. It is capitalism run amok, and it is destroying lives and creating the biggest money inequities in the history of the human race. 80% of the population here is on the verge of poverty. 50 million people are currently living in poverty in this country. God, I can't listen to this bullshit anymore. The biggest misunderstanding is the notion that socialism, which is good, and communism, which is bad, are not the same thing. That might be true in theory, but it never quite works out that way in practice. It is impossible to separate socialism from communism because the former, an economic system, inevitably leads to later, a socio-political system. Why? Because centralized economic control only works if citizens have no rights. No. No mention here of all of the evils that capitalism has caused. Weird that was omitted from this article. No mention of how capitalism actually crushes people. Capitalism creates wars and racism and misogyny and toxic masculinity. Capitalism creates that. No mention of America's endless stream of war. No mention of America's $700 billion military budget. No mention of that. No mention of the $5 to $9 trillion that have been spent on a completely ridiculous global war on terror. No mention of that. Weird. None of this is mentioned in this. Yeah, and then he brings up Venezuela. No mention of the surveillance state that we're currently living in. No mention of being in 8 or 9 wars right now. No mention of military bases on just about every country on the face of the earth. No mention of that in this article. No mention that 85% of all stocks are owned by 1% of the population. There's no mention of that here. Nice try, corporate media. Your bullshit stinks. As does your PhD in microbiology. Has nothing to do with economics, so you're as qualified to write this article as I am. Thanks for watching.